whether or not they are de-escalating.
Ukraine as a precursor to a Russian invasion?
Are they behind the cyber attack, Mr. President?
President of the United States clearly under a lot of pressure now as he's addressed the nation about what's next with Russia and Ukraine. Let's bring in ABC News foreign correspondent James Longman. He is live in Moscow. We also have ABC News political reporter Brittany Shepard with us, ABC News contributor and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, Mick Mulroy. Also, our senior Pentagon reporter, Louis Martinez. Okay, a number of questions here. James, let's start with you. Just overall impressions here from what the president had to say. It doesn't seem like he's got a lot of good options here.
Yeah, but Kira, I mean, I think at the beginning of this day, it did feel as though there was a sense that perhaps we were seeing a de-escalation here. There was all this activity on Twitter that showed that perhaps Russian troops were moving back, that perhaps we could see the beginning of the end. That was certainly how it felt here in Russia. But as the day has gone on and it's become clearer and clearer that that might not actually be the case, that whilst the Russians have said they're de-escalating, while Vladimir Putin himself actually spoke today about a partial withdrawal, all the evidence that the United States has seen anyway, and you heard President Putin there, President Biden there saying it, is that troops haven't really moved away from their positions. And so, yes, there were a lot of good options there when he spoke about the possibility for negotiation and compromise and ongoing talks. But his stance remains, President Biden's stance remains pretty hard. And I think that has been the gamble this whole way through. He spoke there about being very transparent about what the United States knows about what Russia is doing, being so open with intelligence. This has been a very different strategy, if you like, to back in 2014 and 15, pre-bunking that term that we've heard time and time again, possible Russian disinformation. It looked like it was working on Russia, and today it seems that President Biden is doubling down on those sorts of strategies. I thought one thing he said was interesting, though, appealing to the Russian people. He said the United States and Ukraine are not a threat to Russia. We don't have missiles in Ukraine. We do not seek to destabilize Russia. And here it's important to the citizens of Russia, you are not our enemy. Particularly powerful, I think, this, Kira, because that is the diametric opposite to the message that Russians hear. They have heard time and time again, not that Russia is the aggressor, but that the United States is the aggressor. They are the ones trying to expand NATO. They are the ones funneling money and weapons into Ukraine to cause a conflict on the border. And so I think there it was a direct appeal from President Biden to people here in Russia to say, listen, we're ready to talk, but at the same time, if talking ends, we're ready to act. So it's more of the same, as today I think the pressure remains and the possibility of war really does remain, Kira.
And Mick, I mean, if indeed that happens, it could pitch Europe into its, biggest crisis in decades.
Yeah, absolutely, Kara. This is not going to stay confined to the Ukraine. I think everybody knows that. Once the invasion occurs, there will inevitably be an insurgency that follows during the occupation. They will seek safe havens in the bordering countries, and those countries include NATO countries, of which the U.S. has forces. So the chances of this escalating beyond that of Ukraine is high. It should be a concern to everybody, and we should hope, as President Biden said, this is a war of choice for Russia. They don't have to choose to do it. It will be much easier for them to get in this than it will for them to get out of this.
And Brittany, with that said, Biden has tried diplomatic pressure now for months, but so far it just does not seem to be working.
No, Kyra, and it's a very difficult political position that Biden is put in. I know no one wants to think of mass loss of life as political, but he knows that he has to be making an appeal not only to the Ukrainians and to the Russians, but also to the American people. I thought that line in his speech was very, very interesting, given the amount of flack that Biden received over the pullout from Afghanistan. Of course, very different political situations. However, Biden's own job approval rating pretty much sank because many Americans thought that Biden and his troops were unprepared to make that foreign decision. So it's interesting how much Biden is making sure to assure his own people and Congress that he is fully prepared to put all options on the table and to not look like he's being caught so flat-footed like was the public perception around Afghanistan.
So Mick, with that said, I mean, the president has said he does not want to put American troops in harm's way in Ukraine. Can he still avoid that?
So I think he can. I mean, ultimately, it's his choice whether to use, Title 10 or military forces directly against the Russians, and that would have significant consequences, neither of which would be good to the United States or Russia. We still have other forces available. We can use intelligence assets. We can use special operations forces to help support the Ukrainians, mostly during the insurgency that will follow. And that could be very effective against the Russians. This war isn't popular now, or the idea of a war isn't popular now in Russia. After they start seeing their soldiers come back in coffins, it's going to be even more unpopular. So there is a lot of things that the president and the White House in general has available to them, not just U.S. forces. They will be largely there to support our NATO allies and defend that alliance.
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point. I mean, if Russia goes forward with this, it's going to be worse for Ukraine, no doubt. But this is not going to be good for Russia.
No, it is not going to be good for Russia. They saw what we went through over the last 20 years in Afghanistan. And, of course, the Soviets had their own version of that in Afghanistan. This is a much more sophisticated military that already has the most advanced weapon systems, and they're going to fight. And by the way, if you look at our invasion in Iraq, we had 180,000 forces that went in there. Iraq's much smaller in land mass and population. Ukraine's much larger. This is going to be a substantial effort by the Russians, and I think they know, and I think we've seen reports that the Russian military know this is not necessarily going to end well for them.
And Brittany, just the economic isolation and deprivation here could be catastrophic.
Exactly, especially as Congress is mulling further sanctions. Of course, if Biden feels that he has the need, he can, through executive action, sanction Russia and Russian banks, which of course would have a huge squeeze on their economy, of course, spilling over into European economies. There's a question if that happened, Putin could strike back with cyber attacks. We heard a very definitive stance from Biden there in the White House that they will not put up and are prepared to retaliate if any such cyber attacks happen, both against U.S. financial institutions or the Ukrainians themselves. You know, Capitol Hill is currently a bit lock-jammed on a current sanctions bill. Given that the House is out until the end of the month, not much can happen. There's a bit of push and pull on what to do about the Nord Stream pipeline. We heard Biden talk about that. And in his mind, in no uncertain terms, they will stop the production of this gas pipeline to push gas out into Germany. Some Republicans are less on board with that on Capitol Hill. So it's currently interesting to see if the White House is able to back channel with their allies on the Hill to help put economic pressure on Russia from that end. But of course, like we said, the White House has a lot of chips on their table. It's the question if they're willing to blow up that table and blow up economic ties to ensure safety.
What do you think, Mick, about back channeling? Is that even possible? And then if you just monitor what's happening with oil prices, I mean, really, when it comes down to it, you think about Vladimir Putin, his relationship with big money, with big oil. I mean, is he really about to not only hurt his country, but blow up his base of support?
I think it's quite possible. I mean, Russia's, I'm not an economist, but they're a single-track economy, right? They sell oil. To the extent that that gets cut off, either by the sanctions, the removing them from SWIFT and the international bank accounts, this is going to have a significant financial impact on Russia. And I think, as far as back channeling, we should always keep a diplomatic channel open, even if they do invade. And then we can also have a back channel to the extent that we find that necessary. We have, of course, one of our former key diplomats is now the CIA director. So I think we should keep talking. We should all hope that this is resolved by diplomacy and not force.
Diplomacy, not force. Is that even possible at this stage of the game? Listening to the president, Chief White House Correspondent Cecilia Vega with her thoughts now. Cecilia, we heard straight from the president addressing not just the nation, but the Russian people, saying you are not our enemy. What did you make of that?
Well, look, Kira, this was definitely a message to so many different audiences, and you're right, the Russian people certainly one of them. And I would also argue he was speaking directly to Vladimir Putin. He was saying we are not, very clearly, we are not a threat to Russia. U.S., NATO, Ukraine, we are not a threat to Russia. We do not have plans to invade. We do not want a bloody war. That was a very clear message from this White House. I will also say this was a very clear message to Americans. This was the president wanting to lay out the politics of this, to explain to them what this administration has been doing behind the scenes in the lead up to this, and really working these channels of diplomacy to try to avert this crisis that we have seen now happening here behind closed doors at this White House for a number of months. We learned today, Kira, we were talking about this earlier, that the White House has been working with this, what they call the Tiger team, that's carrying out these exercises of experts really behind closed doors, but even at very high levels, cabinet levels here, where they are preparing for how to respond in real time drills if Russia does indeed decide to invade. They're going over scenarios that cover potentially what the first 2 weeks of an invasion would look like. They're looking at the potential for a refugee crisis, which is a very real possibility if indeed this happens. And they're talking about embassy security. So the White House, the message today, diplomacy is certainly on the table, but the president also making it clear that if Russia decides to go the opposite route and actually go through this invasion, they're looking at potential sanctions like they have never seen before, including possibly sanctioning Vladimir Putin himself. Kira.
All right, Cecilia, thanks so much. Global Affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz now. Martha, the president has said he wants to, at all costs, avoid putting American troops, U.S. troops, in harm's way in Ukraine. Can he avoid that at this point?
I think he can, Kira, because they're getting people out of there as quickly as possible. And the U.S. troops being sent to the region are there to shore up our NATO allies. They'll be in Poland. They'll be in Estonia. They'll be in Lithuania. They'll be in Romania. But there's no plan whatsoever to send Ukrainian troops, to send U.S. troops, rather, into Ukraine. They are just not doing that. They've all but ruled that out.
All right, Martha, thanks so much. Take it right back to Ukraine now. Our Terry Moran standing by, been talking to us since early this morning about tensions on the rise. You've now heard the president, Terry. We were sort of forecasting what would he say, how would he direct his message to the American people. Now we saw he made a very direct message to Russians as well, coming out and saying that the people of Russia, you are not our enemy. If Russia attacks Ukraine, it's a war without reason. Your thoughts after hearing what the president had to say?
And a war of choice, he said, Kira, that he put the ball entirely in Vladimir Putin's court, and he did so with the backing of a united NATO alliance, a united Europe behind him. No cracks, no dissent among all those, partners who are frequently at odds with each other, and a united world in many ways against this action by President Putin. And he reached over what used to be an iron curtain. And he said to the people of Russia, this is not something that will go well. We are not a threat to you. We have no intention of putting missiles in Ukraine or anything like that. And I must say I was struck by something listening to President Biden. Vladimir Putin has been the dominant, almost absolute ruler of Russia for more than 20 years, 22 years now. And for the most part, almost exclusively over that time, he dealt with George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump, who, whatever other virtues they had and brought to the Oval Office, were rookies when it came to world affairs, right? They had no experience at this level of crisis, at this level of negotiation. They had all different kinds of other experiences, but not this. And Vladimir Putin got used to American presidents who he could bamboozle or intimidate. I remember George W. Bush saying, I looked into his soul. Vladimir Putin, a man who many people would say, is lacking a soul. But certainly here in Joe Biden, he has met an old Cold Warrior who understands geopolitics and power politics and the ambitions of the Kremlin, whether it's with the czars or the communist leadership or now the autocrat Putin. And he has managed so far to marshal the world against Putin in very significant ways. And I think one of the things that Putin now knows is that he's not up against a rookie. For whatever else he has, whatever cards he's got on the table, he knows that he is playing, so to speak, against someone who understands the game and understands how to play it. Whether that is enough to deter Vladimir Putin is hard to say, but it is clear that the United States has been able, under Biden's leadership, to communicate you are going to pay a tremendous price if you move forward. Here in Ukraine, you know, they are cheering the United States. They feel very close. The one thing that a young man, a veteran, said to me, he said, we need more Stingers. Send us more Stinger missiles. They know they need help, and they are grateful for it. They want more. Kira?
And Terry, at the same time, saying send more Stinger missiles. Also, you said the Ukrainian people preparing for a day of unity tomorrow. How ironic, as we come off of this speech, the president here sending a direct message that this is a war without reason if indeed Russia attacks Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainians, as you have told us, trying to focus on unity and uniting the people and staying strong.
Because absolutely, Kira, the Ukrainians, imagine yourself living here. No one wants this. They don't want to be caught between Putin and Russia and the West and NATO and Biden. They want their country. They want it whole and free. They want to be able to determine their own fate. They have a troubled politics here these days. They've had the former president is under indictment. His supporters say that it's the new president trying to go after him. There's a lot of corruption, a lot of problems here. They are now united because of the threat from Russia. And tomorrow, as you say, we will see the country celebrate or stand up for a national day of solidarity. They're going to come into the streets, and I expect many of them here in Lviv and around the country to come into the streets at 10 a.m. and all sing their national anthem together. You might say, well, you know, what's that going to do? What it does is show Putin and show each other that they are together, and that is a kind of hard power that can't be quantified. That is what Vladimir Putin has done. He has united this country against him and determined that if it comes to war, the Russians may think they're going to get this done in a few hours, a few days or whatever, but it's going to be very much harder than they expect if the Ukrainians have anything to say about it.
Terry, thanks. And thanks to everyone for your insight. And thank you all for joining us. I'm Kira Phillips. The news continues here on ABC News Live right after this break.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.